Well, anyway, this is the structure of our Verde front group. We've got a coordinating team. Really, the function of that team is just process. It's because we have these different working groups working on different things. So it's just when we run into glitches, or if we're trying to stay out in front of stuff, which we rarely do, we get together and try to figure that out on how to take a lot of energy and help it become something that works. This group really started off with the trails. That's where the energy was in the beginning. And we'll get to a slide on that later, and Meryl can help us with that. But kind of an interesting thing happened with this structure. I would say, you know, we've been at it for about 5 years. And when we started, I think there was a period of time where the communities thought of this as being a way for the communities to work with Prescott National Forest to do Prescott National Forest stuff that the communities want. And it really took a couple of years for this paradigm shift and the realization to come in that this isn't just about communities working with Prescott National Forest. This is about communities working with each other, working with nonprofits, working with the state, working with the county, and really becoming a collaborative group. And it happened, which I'm still pleasantly surprised that that happened. And in other words, a case where the different communities stepped up. And I think a lot of it has to do with who's in leadership at the time. You can bang your head against the wall for a long time. But we had 3 mayors that were on board with this, and when they expanded the County Board of Supervisors to 5, then we had 2 county supervisors were on board with this, and suddenly we had county leadership and county and municipal leadership, state leadership, and agency support with Prescott National Forest, the National Park Service. And so we came up with this thing called the Leadership Council. And the impetus for that really came from the local municipalities. And they said, we need to get together quarterly with our leaders. And the rules, which are very loose, we're not too rigid about it, is the municipalities have to have the mayor present at those meetings. They can bring whatever staff they want. You tend to see all the managers at those meetings. The state parks, you have to have at least a park manager level there. National Park Service, superintendent or district ranger, and Forest Service, district ranger level. But they tend to be a bunch of people because the leaders tend to bring everybody with them to tell them what is actually going on. So they need the support staff there. And I think that the development of that group made all the difference with the Verde Front. And the fact that everybody was willing to do it, and it really changed everything in how this worked. That's what led to the development of the String of Pearls Committee, the Economic Development Committee, and it brought the business communities into the decision-making process. And I didn't see that coming, so it was sort of an organic thing, and it happened. And it just goes to show when you have this collaborative process, you never really know what cake you're baking at the beginning. Next slide. Yeah, we were baking a cake and it ended up being a pizza. But, and this is pretty much how it works. And I think just the thing on this slide is 3 things came out of it with this group of big ideas. One was the comprehensive river management, which we have a placeholder name called the String of Pearls because that's the name of a similar effort that occurred in Colorado. In the end, we'll have our own name for it. The economic development and the cooperative marketing part of it, which I think was, has really blossomed into something pretty big. And then another unique thing is all of these leaders, we found funding to take all of our leaders, and they were all excited to go over to Grand Valley, Colorado to see a similar effort that had gone on. They call it in Grand Valley their String of Pearls, which is a cooperative river recreation effort, 27-year-old overnight sensation. They've been working on it for a long time. They're still working on it. They took an area that was an economic blight area and totally transformed it to where they're now a national destination for all sorts of wonderful things going on along the river. Next slide. And I'm going to hand it over to Gail Mabry, the manager of Clarkdale, to talk about this String of Pearls there.
Okay, so we can go to just the next slide. Little history and background. That what I would add to what Chip said about how that leadership council came about. There was a lot of really good work on the ground going on as a result of the Verde Front process that has been kicking off since 2007, 2008. But there was kind of a frustration at some levels that all this work was going on, but going on kind of under the radar from the leadership folks at the higher levels. And I think that discussion is what brought about the whole leadership council idea, that it's great for us, all the rest of us, to be doing all this great work, but if the leadership in the community doesn't recognize it and buy into it, we may not get far along with it. So, and someone of your group spoke a little bit earlier about communication being such a strong point, and I think the reference was maybe Verde Valley seemed to do that a lot better. Well, we didn't always do that a lot better, and actually the whole convening of the Leadership Council, and especially the String of Pearls, came out of a recognition in our region that there was a whole lot of things going on about river recreation and river initiatives, but it wasn't being very well coordinated, even though it was listed as one of the strategies in the Sustainable Recreation Strategy early on. There wasn't initially a group that was focused on river recreation. But over from about 2011 forward, there were a lot of scattered things happening, and so things would pop up in the local newspaper. Oh, Clarkdale's doing this, and Cottonwood's doing this, and American Rivers is doing this, and all of a sudden the leaders started saying, hey, we need to be communicating a little bit better. So we got together, first meeting in February 2013, to start just sharing information, just like this group, about what's happening along the river, who's doing what. And then the very next meeting that we held, that led right into these quarterly meetings, and the very next meeting was that a discussion about where we wanted to go, and those big ideas started to come forward that Chip talked about. So we go to the next slide. I'm gonna be circling back at the end. So this next set of slides is just a couple of examples of some of the pearls that we've identified along the way. The Verde River, for anyone that's not familiar, flows through the Verde Valley. The river's 197 miles long. In the Verde Valley, it's about 50 miles, give or take. Clarkdale is the smallest community in the, not the smallest, but the smallest one involved in this effort, 4,000 people. And we're on the uppermost end of the Verde River, and then it flows through Cottonwood and Camp Verde, and we've got all these other jurisdictions, national parks, state parks, national forests. So these are just a couple of examples of some of the pearls. This first set of slides happen to be pearls in Clarkdale, and I'm going to be talking tomorrow about, I can't remember what it's called on the agenda, larger context, so I won't spend a lot of time on Clarkdale. This is one of our pearls in Clarkdale, the Tuzigoot River Access Point. This is a kind of a primitive boat launch at that site. And then this is just Arizona Game and Fish does fish stocking there at our Tuzigoot River Access Point. And this is an example of one of our boat launch signs. So in this time frame, a lot of river recreation along the Verde River has really come forward. And one of those big ideas was we'd like to see a way for there to be a blue trail, so a paddle trail all the way from Sycamore Canyon all the way down the Verde River through Camp Verde. and then down into the wild and scenic portion of the river. So, next slide, the lower Tapco River access point. This is Clarkdale's newest river access point. It's right now the uppermost developed pearl on the river. And I'm going to talk a lot about this, but this is our ribbon cutting, which we just opened June 18th of this year. And this is a partnership where Clarkdale has a lease agreement with a private landowner in the area, and we pay a whopping $10 a year for the privilege of having a 110-acre site on the river. So it's a great public access point. And then this is one of our Verde River ambassadors. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. We have an outfitter that is licensed on this stretch of river. So Clarkdale has the Verde River at Clarkdale that flows. The Verde River flows from Tapco down to the Tuzigoot River access point. There's 3 miles in between, so people can put in up at Tapco and float for 2 hours in a kayak and end up at Tuzigoot. Next slide.
And Gail,
Yes.
do you want to just explain the concept of the string of pearls? What's the string and what the pearls are?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, yes, I'd be happy to. So the string is the river, and the pearls are recreational assets along the river. And we've identified, so as I said, those were a couple of municipal parks. There are state parks, there are national parks, there are Forest Service river access points along the way. These are representative of some of the pearls and cottonwoods. So Dead Horse Ranch State Park is one of them. Riverfront Park in Cottonwood is another that's just very close to Dead Horse. And then Arizona State Parks has the Verde River Greenway that they've actually been working for since 1984, I believe, in acquiring sites up the river corridor, up and down the river corridor to add to the Verde River Greenway. So just these great efforts going on, but there hadn't been a real coordinated approach to planning recreation strategies that could really move people up and down the river.
And I just want to comment on this, that the beauty of this is that each pearl is locally designed, developed, controlled, and the connectivity is the regionalism and the regional approach. And in this case, it's the river and it's also trails. Trails is form of connectivity. And that allows for independent, much more local efforts and the regional, which is really what's going to work in the long run. So Kate, I just remember Casey was going to be here and talk about this.
Casey was going to be here to
Yeah.
talk about Cottonwoods pearls. I think the next one is actually Camp Verde
Yeah.
pearls, and I think Charlie's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Camp Verde, not only the pearls, but.
And you have Steve too.
It's become very clear why they have the mayor of Camp Verde on here. They send me out first, and if I come back, it's okay.
You're the pro.
Yeah, I'm the pro. We're in an infancy with this, and I'd like to share with you, especially if you're from other regions. I've lived in Camp Verde since 1951, so I've seen a lot of changes. Camp Verde was incorporated in 1985. There was quite a bit of pushback with that because of quote-unquote rugged individualism. I've seen a lot of changes. One of the major changes that I've seen in just the last couple of years has been how the elected officials have come together. Camp Verde was the last bastion of siloism, and we have built relations over the years with the other communities. For example, Gail's the daughter of one of the teachers that worked with me when I was principal in Cottonwood Creek School District. There's a relationship there, and I think that's really important in how you approach this. It's also important to recognize where other people are coming from. And I was looking around some of the notes on the pads around here, communications, words you use, whether you're going to use a forest or you're going to control the forest or you're going to shut down a recreation area or manage it. And I was really happy to hear Gary talking about the economic development component of this. Because from my perspective, having lived in Camp Verde in the years that I have, my ability to be able to bring the concerns of the community into this and focus with what's already being done by these other communities, it kind of works, because Camp Verde has identified the river as being a major component. We have private landowners that live along the river who do not want their way of life and their serenity of the river changed. Now, there's a couple of things that have happened for those landowners that don't mind, but they don't want to have the liability. That's where, as a large group like this, you can get legislation changed. For example, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's legislation in the state of Arizona now where homeowners don't have to be, or property owners along the river are not held liable if you're walking along a designated trail and you get off the trail and you're hurt. That's huge. That's huge. The other aspect of being able to approach those landowners that do not want people coming down the river, I've approached them from this standpoint. I say, Chip, you own land down there, you don't want people floating by, you can't keep them from floating by legally, but how about you, Chip, coming on board and laying the groundwork to help manage this? Because you can either have a free-for-all of people coming down anytime and anyhow and all of this stuff, no signs, puts a stress, if anything happens, it puts a stress on your EMS team. They have no idea where they are on the river. We're on the river, come get me, help me, we've broken a leg or whatever. And so we're beginning to get buy-in from some of these landowners and property owners along the river that are saying, if I can't stop them, then I better have a place at the table in setting up this management area. Camp Verde has 17 miles of the river. We have the Yavapai Apache tribe that has a section of that along their borders. And they are beginning to participate in this, and Steve may be talking a little bit about that. But it's now to get in on this ground floor and this planning that goes along with it. And I was so impressed with the visit up in Colorado. And I could see where Clarkdale, Cottonwood, the intervening sections with the county, also with the tribe and with Camp Verde, that if we can begin to put together a program of management and use, that also falls into the philosophy of the people that live in Camp Verde, that they don't want a whole lot of growth just for the sake of growth. They want smart growth, which is part of our general plan. They want jobs. They want shopping. So my thinking is, as well as a lot of other people, let's make this a recreation destination of where people can come and stay an extended period of time and take advantage not only of the recreation that's there in the Verde Valley, but in Yavapai County, stay longer and not build out, which helps preserve the river, and it also brings in the economic development that's necessary to give those cash registers so that you can do the maintenance and operation things within your town budget. That's about all that I have. We're just getting our feet wet, but I'm excited about the fact that Camp Verde is now on board, as far as I can tell, with our council, in being with these other communities, including Sedona. We realize that the whole Verde Valley, that one thing that affects one community affects us all, and if we can keep each other up to date in what we're doing and how we're going about it, it just benefits us all.
I want to jump right back in and tack on to a couple of things that Charlie said, and I am going to talk more about this tomorrow, but I think it's important to know for Clarkdale, we went into our river part of our project as part of what we call a Sustainable Clarkdale Initiative, and that initiative, in this particular case, with the river focus, and it's a much broader focus also, has to do with economic development and cultural and environmental sustainability. Our approach with the river is that it's amazing how many people in the Verde Valley and Clarkdale didn't know how to get to the river in Clarkdale. We had a river access point, but there were no signs to it, you couldn't get to it. And so we feel strongly that the river and the sustainability of the Verde River is under threat, and that if people don't make personal connections with the river, they're not going to be willing to do the things that are needed to do to save it in the future. So our efforts to promote recreation and promote the river really come back to that as a principle. We really want to help people form connections so that we can save this river in the future. And we think we can do that and preserve the river, do it in a responsible way, and in a way that brings an economic development component to Clarkdale. And I will talk more about that tomorrow, but it's, we're seeing that's bearing fruit for us.
Yeah, would it be okay if Steve took a minute and talked about the Camp Verde River Recreation Master Plan and working with Arizona State Parks before you?
Yeah, one of the things that we've embarked on, we went, thanks to Chip's assistance, was going to the Walton Family Foundation to seek some funding to do some planning in Camp Verde. As Charlie says, we're kind of the last of the Mohegans. We've been kind of behind the ball on getting this stuff done. But we were successful in getting a Walton Family Foundation grant for $50,000 to do some planning. The challenge now is to bring everybody else into the picture. So we are engaging in conversations with the Yavapai Apache Nation to not only get some funding, but to make sure they're at the table with it. Arizona State Parks, which plays such a crucial role in Camp Verde, because at the very southern boundary of our town sits the Rocking River Ranch, 300 acres of wasteland at this point, at least as far as an economic development thing goes, but can someday become one of the crown jewels of the river. Right across the river from it is another 200 acres owned by the Nature Conservancy, and just up from that is the Trustwell property, which is managed by the Prescott National Forest. Those three parcels have 700 and some acres of potential down there where you could have an intensely recreated area from state parks, which they could manage. You could have a float-in place that's probably managed through the Forest Service, and perhaps a nature area on TNCs. But the conversation has never been brought up before. So we're in the process of getting all those parties together. Arizona State Parks has committed some money and time and effort into the process, and we hope to embark on that next year. And actually, we have 17 miles of river to try and operate. And believe me, we have Salt River Project, the Forest Service, two forests, yeah.
Are you talking about in the String of Pearls effort?
No, I'm just talking in the 18 miles
Oh,
of
in
river
18 miles.
in Camp Verde. Many miles of private property along there, state parks land. The town owns about 15 acres along the river too. So it really needs to be a real big public conversation, and that is one of our goals for next year, is to get that conversation started. Oh, so we go to this. So I'm kind of the late guy in this process here. I spent 8 years as a journalist in the Verde Valley and had the opportunity to report on the work that all of you were doing in the various organizations. I was fully aware of what you were doing, but I wasn't a participant in it. And when I managed to finagle my way into the job as an economic development director, I like to make beer.
That was a cinch after we found that out.
Beer's a really great thing to get things done with. I think they wrote a constitution with it, a Declaration of Independence. So, and Chip comes over and assists in the brewing process with me, and we would sit around and have some conversations while we were waiting for the beer to become beer. And one of the things Chip had spun the String of Pearls idea after going to Grand Junction, and I thought, you know, I said, the more we sit here and look at all these component pieces, and I was looking at the component pieces of just a website in Camp Verde at the time, which involved trails and some other stuff, and I was fully aware of a study that the Walton Family Foundation had done called the VRED study, which was the Verde River Economic Development Study. And it really focused on the fact that if you were going to protect your assets, you needed to affix a dollar value to those. People had to understand that there was a financial investment in that river. There was a financial investment in the trails and everything else on the landscape. So I said, Chip, my background tells me the way to do this is to bring people there. And if you bring people there, they will be spending money and they will be recreating. And I think Gail could certainly say, what are you getting, how many people on your river every week now?
Couple hundred.
Couple hundred? I thought it was like 2,000.
Not a week. Couple hundred a week.
A couple hundred a week.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they're just now beginning to see that use. So I brought this idea up, and Chip said, well, why don't we ask the Waltons if they'd like to participate in this too, if they'd be willing to help us. And so we went to them with a proposal to say, look, how about helping us market this? But don't just market the river. You have to market the landscape, which was really everything stretching from the top of the Black Hills across to the Mogollon Rim and into Sedona. It was more than the river. You couldn't just think you would get more value out of your river if you attached it to the rest of the world out there. So they've already bought into it, and they just in the last month or so gave us $150,000 to embark on a process of which we will now be aligned with National Geographic to promote the Verde River Valley, as I like to call it, as a destination. And that process will be involving developing maps and developing cell phone apps and developing a website. All that stuff done by National Geographic with their team, and we actually now will be partnering with them. The beauty of that little gold triangle, as one person told me who's been through this process, is people act a whole lot better when they're around it. So we are ecstatic to have this thing taking off for us. The Sedona Verde Valley Tourism Council, which was already formed, representatives from the destination marketing organizations in Cottonwood, Clarkdale, Camp Verde, Jerome, and Sedona, agreed to jump in on this. We've already put in $20,000 of our own money to begin a marketing survey, and we got a $20,000 grant through AOT to kick off that process. And we just had our initial meeting with National Geographic to lay out the process of how this works. So it's about a year to 2 year process to get it all done, starting with the strategic planning process. And one other thing, the geotourism idea, what made it work so well for all of us is that it is a marketing concept that preaches you don't kill the goose that's laying the golden egg. So in other words, while you're promoting this, you're working with all your land managers to make sure that your marketing is in step with their management and not overrunning and overstepping one another. So very excited to see what the results of this process are, but we think that this will take us where we want to go.
Merrill?
So with this process, when I got in there, this had been going on for a couple of years, but there's some discussion of, well, what has really happened? Has there been anything on the ground happening? So we decided to take a field trip, and that was the first time folks had really come together on that side to do this field trip. And the first one that we looked at was the Copper Cane Trailhead. So it's folks that are here, as well as some of the user groups. So we had, again, just like on the Fresca side, mountain bikers, equestrian hikers. I don't remember if we had any motorized folks show up or not. But point being, we went out, looked at Copper Cane Trailhead, which is one of the first projects that was worked on at that community level. And it took a while to complete, but it's a great trailhead, and we are kind of using that as a sort of a standard for future improvements for trailheads. And that one was done with the help of a lot of people, a lot of volunteer hours, and we worked pretty close with the town of Camp Verde on that one. And then the others, West Mingus Ave, Grief Hill, Salt Mine. So the way the forests have operated in the past, for the most part, is we come up with an idea, we get it implemented on, we'll scope it, and we get it implemented on the ground, and then sometimes people use it, sometimes they don't. And then we progress from that to working with people, so user groups. We'll work with mountain bikers or equestrian group. We go out there, scope this proposal, we get some comments back, do the project on the ground. So that user group is very happy that we got it completed, but then there's other user groups that are going, what happened on, we weren't involved in this process. So we've kind of kept evolving with that to where we're at now. So West Mingus Ave Trail System was a proposal that we received from Cottonwood, and it's for a trail system out there, trailhead and trail system. And then Grief Hill and Salt Mine is a proposal that we received from the town of Camp Verde. And so everybody's looking forward to these projects. And Grief Hill is also tied in with the Black Canyon Trail, so the idea is it follows that same Sheep Drive corridor. So where we can, because we have this larger network now, we're not just looking at what's happening in the Verde Valley, but does this have a tie-in with stuff beyond just the Verde Valley? So in this case, yes, it ties in with that Black Canyon Trail. And where was I going with that? So we have the ability then with the partnerships that we have is to look at it, from this larger landscape. It really is forest wide and beyond. And when we're receiving proposals, we're working with our partners so that they are really multi-use and serve a variety of users. And so I guess the last piece is with trails, we're sort of looking at this two corridor view. There's the river itself, so the opportunity for recreation along the river and tying the communities that way, Verde Valley, and then there's an upland trail system where you can tie in the communities, upland off the river. And one of the key components is that it's not just about trails, but there's also the restoration component. So Chip's group has done a lot of work with some restoration work along the Verde River, and that continues to be a tie-in with all this that's going on.
Just a comment about this group. Those are all Forest Service sites, but it has been cross-jurisdictional. It's just that those, for some reason, they all ended up as the high priority ones. But it was maybe monthly or so, but now it's quarterly, and it's a multi-user forum, so the trails coordinator can come and say, we're thinking about this trail system or this trail, and they just one-stop shop, get feedback. Or the group says, like Celeste says, well, you need to have other user interests in talking about the West Mingus. And so it's become this forum and a way to have a place for people to go to talk about trail issues.
Can I add something else?
Yes?
One other thing that came out of the leadership group, which is one of these benefits, is we have our mayor, and Cottonwood had their mayor, Clarkdale has their mayor in there. So we sat down and started talking about the limited resources that the Forest Service had to do projects. It gave us an opportunity to sit down and go, why don't we quit fighting one another and let's prioritize a list that works for us all. And we recently sent Celeste a letter now, developing another trail that's on here, which will run along Highway 260, which will link Camp Verde to Cottonwood. And although most of the trail that needs to be made out there is actually in Cottonwood, we put it at the top of our list because we think it's a wonderful project. And reciprocatingly, Cottonwood has now endorsed Grieve Hill as to be the next place we'll go to because they see it as a regional hub for trails coming in there. So this cooperation is growing, and we've been talking to Celeste about possibly trying to find a funding mechanism in which we can go in there and do some larger scale NEPA work so we can do a lot of projects without having to get hung up on each one of them individually. And that's where Francisco, we need to talk about some great ideas about bringing more money in here too. So I won't make it tomorrow, but we'll talk sometime. Anyway, that's what I say. One of the benefits of having the leadership in the room is we go do a proclamation and we take it to the council and they stamp it, and then Cottonwood takes it over there and they do a proclamation, their council stamp it. We send it off to Celeste. They have pretty clear direction from the communities. It's like, okay, here's our want list, here's the list of priorities.
I think on that same vein of cooperation, one of those trails was the West Mingus Trail System. And that project was identified early on in the Verde front process. And O'Meara noted that the city of Cottonwood was spurred that initially, came out of them. Well, that whole system is located in the town of Clarkdale. So city of Cottonwood has a planner who's a Clarkdale resident, who's really passionate about trails, and he was willing to carry that torch. And Clarkdale was willing to go, carry the torch because we're a teeny little town and we don't have enough resources. We're supportive of it, we'll continue to support it. And the city of Cottonwood got their resources behind it, and it's really been a driving force. So I think that's another great example of that, shared collaboration that's developed. with the other process.
One thing I need to do though is I need to retract my opening statement about Celeste messing up my neighborhood. I retract that.
Gary?
Gail, well, for all of you, I wanted to address what you touched on that's close to me, is the Blue Trails. I'm still part of the Mobile Bay Canoe and Kayak Club in Mobile, Alabama. And we instigated and pushed the wonderful Blue Trail there, which is very successful, and on the Tensas River, and it's really a phenomenal thing, and it does bring a lot of money economically. And I wanted to also tell you that thank you for doing the Verde. I'm one of those people who leads trips on there, and I use a chainsaw when I go. That's my
There are
favorite
sections where you need a chainsaw.
Okay, so let's move along. Chip?
Just quickly, and then Gail will kind of wrap up our Verde front thing, but, you know, when you have all these different processes going on, there are ebb and flows, and a lot of it has to do with leadership and champions, and the Verde Valley Youth effort, outdoor youth education was probably our strongest effort going in, and because it had really strong leadership and support from the National Park Service. The National Park Service went through a period the last couple of years of where people transferred, got new jobs, and they wound up with a lot of positions that were not filled and their capacity plummeted. And so this thing has not been that active the last couple of years, but just in the last 6 months, they've filled those positions. And they actually now, 2 weeks ago, filled a position for the youth education and outreach. So we expect this to resurge. And I think that's one of the things with these collaborative efforts is sometimes one convener is not enough. That's where the beauty of having the co-conveners, because as we all know, especially, you know, with the Forest Service, people come, people go. If you have a broad collaborative effort with different partners, you tend to have continuity where if you're just depending on one agency or one nonprofit or one municipality, you may not have that. Next slide. Back to you, Gail.
So we're back, Verde Front outcomes, and this is probably for all of us, so anybody jump in when you can. I guess the big takeaways and outcomes, obviously opening up the avenues for communication and collaboration. I think it took it to a whole new level when we put the Leadership Council in place, even though they're meeting only on a quarterly basis. All the work, as Tawny said, is going on in those circles. It's been really critical to have them really engaged, and they're really engaged, as the mayor, you know, is attest to here. Mapping out existing resources. So this, I'm gonna, the String of Pearls effort, we actually had a strategic planning session on in just July of this year. We had our cross visit to Grand Valley in April. I'm gonna go there first, and then I'll go to the mapping exercise. So the cross visit that Chip referred to, I don't know if he said, but that was Grand Valley, Colorado. So it's Grand Junction, the city of Fruita, and the city of Palisades, and Mesa County, and then all the jurisdictions that touch into that. Their state parks, their BLMs, big national parks. And that was a really great eye-opening trip, I think, for all of us that are involved in the String of Pearls process. It just really gave us some great ideas from not only on-the-ground projects, but just the structure of how they've worked together, that overnight success for 27 years. And it made us feel pretty good, because we, in many aspects of what we were doing, we were actually a little bit ahead of the game from what they've been doing, and they've been working through it. So I think it's a really good example of how you can learn from others and really make progress in doing that more quickly than you would otherwise. So then the mapping exercise actually came out of our strategic planning in July. We took just the String of Pearls initiative to do strategic planning, and we came out of that with 4 subcommittees to work on different projects. Mapping is one of them, so that we could actually, instead of just continuing to talk about, oh, the String of Pearls, we could actually start to map it out and say, here's what we consider the pearls today, here's where we think pearls would be in the future, and here's how they all connect, both through the river, that string, and then the upland trails through the Verde Front process. So that mapping is underway, and I think our next meeting's in September, and we'll probably have,
It is September.
it is in September, and we'll
It's
have a
next
great map.
week.
It's next week. Oh, it is September,
We're
yeah,
already-
it is September. I got
The
it.
mapping process
Yeah.
also allowed us to look at places we shouldn't be. So we brought in
Right.
biologists, we brought in Fish and Wildlife Service and other land managers to say, okay, as we look at this, we kind of want to shy away from some areas of eagle nesting sites, other stuff along the river. We just think that's really crucial to the whole process.
Another one of the 4 groups is the messaging team, and Tony talked about that. So I worked with that messaging team. We do some of the PR, so when we have significant things happening in the process, we get some press releases out there. But the other thing that our messaging team is doing is working actually, I wouldn't think, but on signage and collaborating cross agencies on consistency in signage up and down the river. And that may seem like a really easy thing, but probably not for everyone here. But when you're talking about different jurisdictions and how they approach signage and what all their rules are, it can be really complicated. So that was in July. For September, we're gonna have 2 reports back on that. One is bridge signage, so that people that are kayaking on the river, when they come to a bridge, they don't just go, well, that's that pink bridge. Well, actually, that's the Tuzigoot Bridge. So if they see a sign there, they at least know where they're at from that perspective. So we have one sign that the county's put up, and we're trying to lead a process through this group to get signage on all the bridges throughout the Verde Valley. Consistency there. And then the other great example, I think it's the Forest Service and state parks and the town of Clarkdale and a private business owner that's part of our group, working on a sign package for flood and storm safety messaging. You wouldn't believe how diverse our flood and storm safety messages are among the Forest Service, state parks, and the municipality. But we're going to come back to the group in September with a recommendation on, okay, we think this meets all of our requirements and is a good, consistent sign that we could use up and down the river for all our jurisdictions. So we're trying to get all that kind of stuff done so that when Charlie's ready to build his park in Camp Verde, he can say, great, I'm going to save a lot of time because I have all that. That's already done.
You're gonna make this really good.
The other 2 are community outreach, so developing for the String of Pearls focus, how we're going to continue to get more and more community involvement in that effort, and then organizational structure. So we can, you know, in Grand Valley, they have a riverfront commission, and we're very interested in forming something like that to take the String of Pearls idea forward. So there's a group that's working on that. There's also a group working on legislation to get an initiative for the Heritage Fund reinstated on that ballot in 2016. Actually, the Arizona Heritage Alliance is leading that, but we've got a core group of us that are feeding into that process as well.
Jeff, it's a whole other topic, but this idea of creating this commission as a mechanism, a collaborative mechanism to transcend shifts in everything and to become a way to, some kind of funding coordination mechanism. That's what we're in the middle of right now, is figuring out what's the best way to set that up.
Right.
So, yeah, again, really to add that sustainability, not only to this process, but to all of the efforts underway, from financial sustainability in particular, and just cultural leadership sustainability. So,
I think is this the last?
Yep.
This is, last slide. Yeah. There we go.
And again, communication, collaboration, relationships, as Charlie said, are really key. The Leadership Council, and focus on sustainability, social, economic, environmental.
So I wanted to also ask Celeste, who's been involved in all of it, to comment on whatever you come up with. You were prepped to think of some really salient.
I know. And
I'll
actually,
give you
these
some time.
What is it?
engrossed in this.
I know. This is
In
great.
connection with this first one, key components, I think another one's been just perseverance and patience. One person that isn't here today is Max Castillo with State Parks. And he saw this kind of moving forward and then just stop abruptly and be put on hold for several years, only for it to be resurrected again. And he still has just a fabulous attitude towards it, and is just excited
No, he doesn't, he's retiring.
That's why you got a good attitude.
Just gotta hold him out.
But he's been very instrumental in this whole process, so, yeah, that perseverance and patience has certainly helped out.
Yeah, for Max, it'll be a 30-year overnight success.
Yeah.
That's better.
He's the Greenway coordinator. Okay, Celeste, you want to say anything?
Well, and speaking of the Greenway, TNC and some other, folks who are not here either, and are also been part of, kind of instrumental in, tying the river and some of this together too, so, these guys did a great job. I've come in as a ranger for like 4 years now in the process, and with the folks that were pretty much set, especially, CHIP and some of the organizations, I think it was just kind of keeping those folks going and how to keep things flowing, and I think the key was to have the communities working together, and it's the we, versus the Forest Service trying to take the lead on anything, and I think that was the key message, so I don't have anything else to add. You guys are doing great. I think getting Copper Canyon Trailhead, let the public know that we could finally get something through, getting that trailhead done through that process was good, and so it's the next, how do we get that next big project done? And I think Steve hit on it, because we need some more help. We need to be on a bigger landscape scale level versus these small little projects. So if we can get the NEPA done on a larger scale, it'll be good to go.